nature, reaching more than 7,000 young people and teachers each year. Filantropía Corte Solari has been an outstanding promoter of climate change mitigation and biodiversity conservation in Latin America and the Caribbean through scientific research and environmental education and outreach project developed by Mary Foundation, part of Philanthropy Corte Solari. From 2024, Francisca is the new member of the USN's 15 Patriots of Nature that bring together the world's leading conservation leaders to mobilize resources and technical capacity and strengthen USN's management and vision for conservation. Francisca, you are very welcome.
Gracias, Patricia. A ver si hoy día puedo ir más lento para que Patricia me pueda traducir de mejor manera, porque a veces me apasiono y no logramos llevar el ritmo. Pero comentar de que nosotros estamos muy, nuestro alineamiento tiene que ver obviamente con la Agenda 2030. Chile creo que es un país que se destaca ya que tenemos una historia con Douglas Tompkins y Chris Tompkins, que creo que fueron los padres de la conservación del mundo de Chile, donde ellos finalmente entregaron todas esas tierras al Estado. Por lo tanto, ya venimos, esta generación nueva, venimos ya con la conservación, diría yo, más instalada en nuestro día a día. Nosotros como Filantropía Corte Solari partimos trabajando hace 25 años en una educación que era integral. Era muy importante cuando hablábamos de esa integralidad que no podíamos dejar de lado la naturaleza. Y eso fue lo que nos llevó a nosotros a crear en 3 latitudes distintas, en la latitud 22, en San Pedro de Atacama, en la zona central, en la latitud 33, y en la zona de Patagonia, en la latitud 44, desarrollar un modelo que pretende, que es en el fondo, cómo vamos acercando la naturaleza al aula. Nuestro interés era llegar a más personas, a lo público, a lo privado, a la sociedad civil. Necesitábamos que la ciencia en el fondo se pusiera al servicio de las personas y que no quedara como dentro de la ciencia. Entonces estas 3 reservas se crearon. Estas 3 reservas se crearon con la idea de laboratorios naturales para compensar, colaborar con la educación formal. Es decir, pensando en que para poder educar en este nuevo paradigma necesitamos que los jóvenes, los niños y las niñas, dentro de las políticas públicas del gobierno esté la clase de educación en la naturaleza. Por lo tanto, estas reservas, estos parques, fundamentalmente nacen para poder, como un modelo, para compensar la educación formal con la educación en la naturaleza. En Chile también podemos hablar de que el privado juega un gran rol en la conservación. Cuando hablamos de áreas terrestres protegidas, el Estado tiene 339 áreas protegidas y entre los privados creo que son como 370 áreas protegidas privadas. Por lo tanto, en Chile el privado sí hace un esfuerzo por conservar, porque entiende lo importante que es conservar un pedacito de tierra en su país, ¿ya? Entonces eso también es destacable que nosotros como chilenos llegaremos a la Agenda 2030 porque ya estamos en la Agenda 2030 con las áreas marinas protegidas y con las áreas terrestres protegidas. Sí sumamos también a los privados, que eso es relevante. Comentar de que, bueno, estas reservas tienen un modelo de conservación efectiva. Nos atrevimos a hacer un modelo de conservación efectiva. ¿Cómo? Nosotros como privados nos hacemos cargo de un territorio pero nos hacemos cargo de una manera responsable, haciendo una conservación que fuera también para la comunidad y para el territorio. Por lo tanto, trabajamos un modelo que tiene 4 dimensiones. Hablamos de la importancia del territorio, de la naturaleza como base, por lo tanto ahí hacemos un estudio muy exhaustivo con líneas base para observar cuáles son los objetos y las amenazas territoriales de cada uno de los territorios que tenemos. Eso es como lo fundamental, entender dónde estamos, dónde está el territorio. De ahí también, para nosotros dentro del modelo, la cultura, las personas que vivan ahí son fundamentales, porque desde ahí está el discurso. Por lo tanto, no es lo mismo para nosotros trabajar en la latitud 22 que trabajar en la 44. Son mundos totalmente distintos, paisajes totalmente distintos. Después hablamos tenemos lo natural, cultural, lo social, que buscamos en el fondo cuáles son esas amenazas territoriales, cuáles son esos objetos de conservación territoriales para buscar sinergias con actores principales de las comunidades para poder lograr objetivos que sean reales y que puedan ayudar a resolver los problemas del territorio. Y luego, diríamos, el gran problema, que yo creo que es el que nos trae en esta conversación, es el problema económico. El problema de cómo hacemos que estas reservas puedan ser sostenibles. Entonces entendemos que ese es uno de los grandes desafíos que hoy día, por lo menos nosotros como privados, también estamos tratando de buscar y llegar a que las reservas sean sostenibles. Porque conservar es muy caro. Podemos conservar de 2 maneras. Podemos conservar a puerta cerrada, y digo, pero ¿quién tiene el dinero, también lo económico para conservar un territorio y dejarlo guardado? No es factible eso. Entonces sí podemos entender de que los privados invierten en territorios de conservación, pero hay que buscar un modelo o políticas públicas que ayuden a esos conservacionistas o filántropos a que puedan avanzar con mayor fuerza hacia la conservación, porque realmente es un sacrificio para nosotros como chilenos poder conservar. Pero lo hacemos porque obviamente en nuestro corazón está nuestro país y entendemos la importancia para el futuro del país y de nuestro país, de nuestra gente, la importancia de conservar nuestros territorios y nuestra biodiversidad. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Francisca. This is a major thing, and I think that we're going to discuss about that. Tristan already mentioned it. I mean, how are we going to financiate the conservation, not only in Chile, but I mean in the South, in the global South in general also. So now we are going to give the floor to Stewart McGuinness, who is the Deputy Director General of USAN. Stewart McGuinness has worked in sustainable development and biodiversity conservation for 35 years. He has lived for extensive periods in Tanzania, Sudan, Ghana, and Costa Rica, undertaking conservation fieldwork. He led the development and promotion of forest landscape restoration, one of the first purpose-built nature-based solutions, to which over 60 countries have committed more than 210 million hectares under the Born Challenge. He and his team at USAN have worked over the last 12 years on defining and promoting the concept of nature-based solutions and supported its application to climate change, food, water security, and disaster risk reduction. He's currently the Deputy Director General of USAN, with responsibility for the USAN program of work. Stewart was educated at Oxford Universities and Queen's University, Belfast. Thank you very much to be here. We give you the floor, Stewart.
Thank you very much, and actually maybe let me just say first of all thanks very much to Mary Foundation, to Philanthropy Corte Solare, to the Velux Foundation and University of Azure for both convening this. I think this is a really important topic, and also for inviting me to give a few thoughts on this here. So I'd really like to build on what's been said before. To understand Target 3, I think one needs to really put this in its broader context. It's simply not just about a question of moving progressively towards that 30%. And the reason for that, and this has been alluded to already, is that we need to be careful. There's no immediate inference currently that protected areas mean more biodiversity conservation, and in fact a better biodiversity conservation. In fact, we know this. In 1990, protected area coverage was roughly about 8%. Now we're well up over, we're moving towards 20%, and yet in the same period of time the red list index has declined by 15%, and in fact for some taxonomic groups it has declined a heck of a lot more. We also know that also in terms of species populations, WWF released a report earlier this year which said that in a slightly broader period of time, over the last 50 years, we've seen a 73% decline in species populations. So that's not to say that protected areas don't work, they absolutely do. But I do think it comes to this whole point that I think it's been reinforced by all the panel, that it needs to be in a much broader context. And I would actually say that rather than those figures I've given, rather than sort of diminishing the importance of protected areas, they actually raise the importance of protected areas, but it's how we actually use protected areas most effectively. They are between the nexus of climate change, biodiversity conservation, and I would say social equity and inclusion. Protected areas, I think, are one of the issues that sit right in the middle. And in fact, that is very much currently I'm bringing in all the comments from IUCN members, about 900 comments from IUCN members to the next IUCN program, and that is how we're framing the program around these three key areas: conservation, biodiversity conservation, reducing species loss, protected area, and enhancing protected areas, the biodiversity climate nexus, and the issues around equality, social justice and inclusion. And it does actually, so this comes, and this has been reinforced before, and of course it's very much in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, of the importance of a whole of society approach, and that when we look at Target 3 we need to be looking beyond the boundaries of Target 3. We mentioned issues like agricultural subsidies, we've actually mentioned the role of the private sector. All these need to come together. So maybe let me just say what IUCN's doing quite quickly on this. I think, again, to really make protected areas effective, I think there's a couple of things. It's not just a question of gazetting them and leaving them. First of all, they have to be in the right place. There has to be a strong overlap with areas of key biodiversity importance. And the good news is that actually this has, again, if we really want to link effective conservation of species and ecosystem function with protection, then we need to make sure there is that overlap, and that has improved with, especially with the introduction of the key biodiversity KBAs, key biodiversity areas, in that framework, which IUCN and its members, we got everybody together to say, how do we bring birds, mammals, say zero extinction, how do we bring that all together to see where those key biodiversity areas are? And what we've seen actually is a real progressive increase on that. We had in 2000, there was about 30% of key biodiversity areas were covered with protected areas. That is now up at 45%, and if you look at partial coverage, it's edging towards 65%. So a lot more work to do, but I think moving this in the right direction. The other thing that I think is really important is we must, that protected areas are an integral part of society. And I'm going to be very honest here. I think we as conservationists need to reflect that in some parts of the world, and that the establishment of protected areas was less than distinguished, less than stellar. There were the rights and engagement and agency of communities, and particularly of Indigenous peoples, were ignored. So there is a very, very strong social justice element that we need to get right as well for management effectiveness. Some of the things that, again, just then to highlight what IUCN, and I say that the IUCN as a union, so our 1,400 members and our fantastic network of 17,000 scientists in the 7 expert commissions, what we've been doing, including actually the World Commission on Protected Areas, and it would be remiss for me not to give a particular shout out to those colleagues in this event. I think first of all there's the protected areas categories, which as you know define approaches to and categorise protected areas on their objectives. From category 1, strict nature reserve, to category 6, protected areas with sustainable use of natural resources. And I want to emphasise very clearly here, there is no hierarchy. 1 is not better than 6, and I say that because I live in a category 5 protected area, so I feel quite passionate about that. It's actually about the management approaches that are pursued to make those effective in delivering strong outcomes. The other role that IUCN is playing is we are a official advisor to UNESCO World Heritage Committee. We are this is done through a rigorous scientific approach. There is people complain sometimes that World Heritage is getting political. And my sense is good, because it means it matters. It means so. But what we've got to do in IUCN is to really make sure that the advice we are giving is without fear and favour. It is really based on the science. We've talked about effective management, and I think this is really important. And Peter, you raised this issue as well. So we have established now, again, working with and drawing on the science and the advice and the experience from the practitioners and scientists within the World Commission on Protected Areas. We've developed up the green list of protected and conserved areas, and this is really a conservation good news story, so that we're really building up a process whereby we can identify and indeed then issue certificates of effective management. And that effective management isn't just about having good management plans in place, it's about the issues of social inclusion and incorporation of values of the communities that live in and around the protected areas. At the minute we're just about, we're now in a sort of a growth trajectory. We've now got 100, just short of 100 protected areas certified. The ambition is that we will increase that by tenfold by 2030. And again, we're actually starting to see real momentum. Countries are reaching out now, and they actually see this as a real, that this being able to say we are effectively managed is a real, is an advantage to them, and to promote those protected areas. We're also doing a lot of, as I say, we act very much in IUCN and its commissions, act very much as a science policy interface. So for example, we issue the Protected Planet report, and for the one that we released just a couple of a month ago in Cali, it was the first report to really sort of fully assess where we are in this trajectory towards Target 3. We know there is a lot bringing in and collecting from official data to see how the protected and conserved areas, where they actually are. We now know, we can say, 17.6 of terrestrial and inland waters and 8.4 of marine coastal areas. So there's a benchmark is there, but there's an awful lot more that we need to do to move towards the 2030 target, and say not only to get those areas gazetted, but to get them effectively managed, to make sure that there is they work with and enjoy the support of the community that live around there. And then I want, maybe just to conclude, I want to just focus on the issues of human rights and inclusion, because I think we cannot actually talk about protected areas if this is not front and centre. IUCN fundamentally believes in a rights-based approach to the establishment and management of protected areas. We think this is not only the right thing to do, although it absolutely is the right thing to do, it's also the most effective thing to do as well. And I think there's some really interesting examples coming from Canada recently, where they've expanded their national parks, but they've worked this and co-designed this with First Nations and actually ended up with larger configurations of those areas. So, and the likelihood that those will be now much better managed. I do think we have to be honest about the history of protected areas and the issues there and the process which is happening now of decolonising the management and of protected areas. That is an issue that very strongly came up at the Africa Protected Areas Congress last year, 2 years ago in Kigali, and I think it's something we all should embrace. It is, I think we want to see, if we're talking about 30% of our lands and waters being under this management regime, then we have to see it being really inclusive. We have to see it actually being something that society wants to embrace and helps, both for the long term, for the long-term prospects of biodiversity conservation, but also for how they function and deliver, again, as been brought up by the panel, these whole of society approaches. Just on that, one thing we've been working with our Indigenous peoples members. IUCN has a distinct category of Indigenous people, a membership for Indigenous peoples, and we've worked to co-design with the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. We have co-designed a new initiative called the Padong Initiative, which is really aiming at building capacity, but critically, and the issue of finance has been raised a couple of times. It's not just about getting more money into protected areas. It's I always say, innovative finance is not innovative enough if it's not inclusive. So it's about getting money down to the custodians and stewards of protected areas, particularly on Indigenous lands and territories. And so we've just, that has been launched last year. The Government of Canada have very generously started to resource that, and we will work with that again as we think a very effective strategy of building that up. Finally, there's just two other things I want to mention. The other thing is, it's very good. Moving forward, we want a rights-based approach. We want to see agency and inclusion of local communities. We want to see that being resourced. But we've also got to realise there are legacy issues there. And so the other thing that we're actually working on is to see, can we actually put in place something that recognises the legacies, and a way IUCN works on convening. So can we pull together and recognise those legacies where injustices have been done, that then start a process of reconciliation, and then find forms of redress. And that doesn't necessarily mean financial redress, but it means redress to work through a better way of effective management. A couple of last words. OECMs have been mentioned. OECMs, of course, will be critical to help us move to target target 3, and there, I think, key role for Indigenous peoples. Key role obviously for the public sector, but also, as you've said, Francisca, for the private sector as well. The private sector have got a lot of non-operational lands that could be much more effectively managed. Some also are doing offsets, quite good quality offsets, but again, those could be actually fed into and used as part of OECMs. So maybe I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Panel, such a panel. We have been talking about Indigenous people, private sector, non-operational lands. It's a really interesting point. The market, I was thinking about Vera and the potential market around the certification, if it works or not. Well, a lot of things that we need to discuss after the intervention. But now I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Amadou Sanoussi Dafé. I can translate to Mr. Dafé. I'm going to explain his bio in French and then in English. Alors, Monsieur Amadou Sanoussi Dafé est diplômé de l'Institut d'électronique d'Abidjan, en Côte d'Ivoire. Il s'est orienté vers le management des organisations minières et a reçu tout au long de son parcours des formations professionnelles très enrichissantes. Il est actuellement le vice-président du Conseil économique, social et culturel du Mali, trésorier général de la Chambre des mines du Mali et président de la Confédération nationale des sociétés coopératives des orpailleurs du Mali. So, as I said, Mr. Dafé was graduated from the Institut d'électronique d'Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. Monsieur Dafé is also a specialist in the management of mining organization and has received professional training throughout his career. He's currently the Vice President of the Economic, Social and Cultural Council of Mali. He's also the Treasurer General of the Malian Chambers of Mines and President of the Confédération nationale of Sociétés coopératives des orpailleurs of Mali. You are very welcome, Monsieur Dafé. Vous êtes très bienvenu.
Merci. Merci Patricia, merci les co-débatteurs.
So thank you very much, and obviously all other panelists.
Pour nous avoir accueillis dans votre stand ce matin.
To welcome us in your stand this morning.
Parler du cas d'un pays africain comme le Mali.
So talk about Mali, an African country, West Africa country.
C'est très important.
It's really important.
Je m'excuse, je ne comprends pas bien l'anglais.
I'm sorry because of my English.
Donc, je n'ai pas beaucoup participé au débat parce que je ne comprenais pas trop l'anglais. Ceci dit, je vais y aller très vite.
So I'm going to start quickly.
Parce que on a le Mali, on a le panel de haut niveau tout à l'heure en plein air à partir de 10 heures.
Because later we have another panel with Mali.
Justement, c'est pour parler un peu de la durabilité.
So we want to talk about sustainability.
En Afrique, le cas particulier au Mali.
And in particular in Africa and in Mali.
Les défis en Afrique sont nombreux.
So in Africa we have a lot of challenges.
Entre autres, nous pouvons parler de la dégradation des écosystèmes et la ratification des ressources hybrides.
So we have to talk about the degradation of our ecosystem and the hydric resources.
La pollution.
Pollution.
Et l'érosion et la destruction de la biodiversité.
And the destruction and erosions of the biodiversity.
Au-delà de ça, nous avons des opportunités
But beyond that, we have
dans
some
le continent
opportunities in the continent.
Qui se présentent comme suit: l'innovation.
For example, innovation.
Ça, c'est des opportunités que nous venons saisir au niveau des différents COP dans les débats avec les différents débatteurs.
So those opportunities, we can see those opportunities throughout different COPs in different panels and discussions.
S'inspirer de l'expérience de ces pays.
We can also get inspired by the experience of other countries.
En matière d'innovation.
In terms of innovation.
Et au-delà de ça, renouer des relations de partenariat dans le sens du bilatéral et du multilatéral.
And this kind of event also allows us to establish relationships and bilateral conversation with other countries and partners.
En plus de ça, nous avons l'implication de la jeunesse pour relever le défi qui est très important parce que tout le travail contre le changement climatique, c'est l'avenir, c'est eux les enfants, eux la jeunesse.
Another very important issue for us is the role of the young people that are going to take care of the climate change in future years.
Au défi et à la prise en compte des opportunités, l'Afrique a fait preuve d'une ambition certaine.
So considering the challenges that we face, Africa has shown a lot of ambitions
et d'un potentiel indéniable
And a lot of potential also.
Pour concevoir des solutions durables propres.
In terms of developing their own solutions.
Adaptées au présent et à l'avenir.
And at the same time, their own solutions that are adapted to the present and to the future.
Rapidement, je vais évoquer quelques cas au Mali.
And I'm going to share with you some examples from Mali.
En fonction de l'importance des défis majeurs ci-dessus indiqués, le développement durable revêt une importance toute particulière pour le Mali.
So considering the sustainable development, considering the situation that I already exposed, the sustainable development is really important for the Mali.
À l'instar des autres pays africains,
beside the other countries of Africa.
À cet égard, le pays bien disposant d'importantes ressources naturelles.
Our country has a lot of natural resources.
Des dispositions pertinentes sont observées par les autorités maliennes.
And Mali authorities have developed a lot of dispositions, yes.
En vue d'atteindre une croissance économique durable.
In order to reach a sustainable economical increase.
Tout en préservant l'environnement.
But keeping obviously environment resources.
Il s'agit entre autres
so what we are trying to do is
l'alignement de nos politiques publiques sur l'objectif de la durabilité pour une économie résiliente.
So to put the economy at the services of a resilient economy and development.
L'élaboration des stratégies et des plans d'action.
So the elaboration of strategy and action plans.
Dans beaucoup de domaines au niveau environnemental.
In a lot of environmental topics.
Dans le cadre de la protection de l'environnement.
In terms of environmental protection.
De la ressource, de la gestion des ressources forestières et fauniques.
In terms of management of forestry reserves.
De la conservation de la biodiversité.
In terms of biodiversity conservation.
De la gestion des zones humides.
In terms of humid management area.
La protection des cours d'eau.
In terms of water and hydrate protection.
L'assainissement.
Assainissement.
Yeah.
I don't know how you say that in English. Sanitation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
In terms of sanitation.
Du contrôle des pollutions et de la nuisance.
In terms of control of noise.
De la gestion des stations d'épuration.
And in terms of management of epuration of stations.
Et de la restauration de l'écosystème dégradé.
And in terms of the restoration of degraded ecosystem.
Dans tous ces domaines, le Mali, l'État a travaillé, a fait sortir des législations.
So in all those topics, Mali has developed different kind of legislations.
Des codes pour l'environnement.
Codes about environment.
Et des plans d'action.
And action plans.
Qui permet, dans la gestion de l'environnement, pour pouvoir dire telle année, tel jour, il y a des activités, il y a ça, il y a ça. Et dans la gestion aussi des ressources forestières et fauniques, dans la biodiversité, tout est encadré avec des plans d'action.
So to develop a pipeline around either the forestry management or other topics that we already discussed.
Donc, je ne vais pas, compte tenu du temps imparti, je ne vais pas développer tous ces plans.
So I'm not going to explain all those plans.
La prise en compte de la dimension du développement social comme priorité dans les politiques publiques de lutte contre le dérèglement climatique.
So for us, for our government, it's absolutely primordial the management of the social dimensions in the fight of the climate change.
Parce que là, c'est très important. Nous avons travaillé dans ce sens-là en mettant des politiques sur place pour la dimension sociale.
So we have developed many social policy, public policy.
Voilà, pour mieux prendre en compte les besoins des couches vulnérables, les plus exposés à cette menace.
To taking care of the most vulnerable people that are facing this threat.
Tout ce qu'on parle au niveau de l'adaptation, de l'atténuation, il s'agit de ces couches vulnérables qu'il faudrait les encadrer, qu'il y ait une politique afin de les soutenir.
So when we talk about adaptation, we need to take care about vulnerable people and develop public policy for them.
Au-delà du social,
so beyond the social area,
le gouvernement, dans l'efficience de la gouvernance au niveau international, national et territorial,
in terms of international, national and territorial terms,
le gouvernement a pris en compte l'enjeu économique,
the government take care about the economical challenge,
environnemental
challenge,
dans tous les processus de planification,
in each planification process,
d'exécution et de suivi, évaluation des politiques.
In each process of design, execution and evaluation of the public policy.
Dans les plans et programmes de développement durable,
in each development of a program of sustainable development.
Donc vous comprenez avec moi que toutes ces actions vont permettre à l'État de travailler dans le sens, tout en prenant en compte des aspects qui sont très importants dans le cadre de la planification, de la bonne gouvernance.
So as you can see, Mali have done a huge work in terms of governance, in terms of planification of each dimensions and area of sustainability.
L'implication des communautés locales dans la prise de décision.
So the implication of the local communities in decision.
À cet effet, des initiatives publiques à l'attention des populations.
So in terms of participation of the public in those public policy.
Sur les risques et les enjeux liés à la problématique du développement durable en général.
Considering the risks and challenges of the sustainable development in general.
À l'environnement et à la santé de façon spécifique ont été mises en œuvre.
Considering the environment and health, we have developed many politics around that.
Donc voilà en quelques mots quelques éléments de réponse que je voulais donner et quelques préoccupations de nos États par rapport à cette conservation de la biodiversité tout en allant dans l'agenda de 2030.
So this is in a few words how I want to explain what we are doing from from Mali, considering the sustainable agenda.
Je vous remercie très infiniment.
I thank you very much.
Et que j'ai les documents en papier, je vais vous transmettre.
And I have all the documents that
c'est beaucoup plus volumineux.
Obviously, it's a lot more. He's going to share with us in order to share with you.
Ok, merci et vous demandez la permission, je vais vous quitter pour aller.
Yes, of course.
Merci tout le monde.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
In español, or you say thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Daffé. On vous remercie beaucoup. Et si vous pouvez m'envoyer les documents, comme ça je le partage avec le reste. Voilà. So thank you again. And now we are going to finish with Ayman Cherkawi, Director of the Hassan II International Center for Environmental Training, who is Deputy Chair of the UCN World Commission of Environment Law. He's also the coordinator for the Mohammed VI Prize for the Climate and Sustainable Development and Deputy Chair, as already said that. Ayman was re-elected in 2022 for a second mandate by African organization accredited to UNEP as regional facilitator of major groups and stakeholders in Africa. Ayman is also Obama Foundation, I was surprised, wow, Africa Leaders, Lead Counsel for Climate Change at the Center of International Sustainable Development Law, Ambassador for the Adaptation Without Borders Initiative, Atlantic Dialogues Emerging Leaders, Ayman has academic background in climate change, sustainable development, finance, law, and engineering. Previously, he was executive director of the Global Compact Local Network in Morocco for UNDP CGEM, special advisor to the presidency of the COP29, as well as legal advisor to the Environment Minister of the Kingdom of Morocco, judge for the SDG Action Awards, and work for Valiant Consulting, the International Air Transport Association, and Air Liquide. Ayman has also engaged professionally with UNDP, World Bank, GGI, AUC, and GIS. You're very welcome, Ayman.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the Philanthropy Côte Solari for the invitation. We are glad to have partners with Côte Solari on various activities, particularly in the context of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. I would also like to thank Mary Foundation, Velux Fonden, IUCN, of course, of which I'm also a part of, and Université Côte d'Azur. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the room of Mr. Moqsit, who is the Secretary General of the IPCC. I believe the 7th assessment cycle provides an important space to drive the agenda forward, and we are discussing here, for example, through the special report on climate change and cities. As the distinguished executive president was highlighting Chile earlier, I also want to highlight the very positive COP25 presidency of Chile, and I warmly think, among other things, of my two good friends, the two Gonzalos, the high-level champion and the chief negotiator, and the ongoing leadership of Chile on ocean, including in the process through the Ocean Climate Dialogue. So I'll touch briefly on 3 points. First, Morocco. Second, the foundation work. And finally, a few words about the Commission as well. So regarding Morocco, Morocco has the longest coastline in Africa with 3,500 kilometers, and it is the only African country with access to both the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. It has a total marine protected area, whether existing or being implemented on both facades, of about a bit more than 130,000 hectares, with a lot of work currently ongoing in terms of potential additional marine protected area. Morocco is very much connected to both this Mediterranean space and Atlantic space, and there are very important African initiatives that can help further drive the agenda that we're discussing. For example, the Royal Initiative for Sahel countries, of which Mali is a member, the Climate Commission on the Congo Basin, the Climate Commission on the Sahel State, the Climate Commission on African Island States, the African Atlantic States Process, the Blue Belt, among other important initiatives. The Mohammed VI Foundation for Environmental Protection is chaired by Her Royal Highness Princess Al Hasna. I'm the director of his academic arm, the center, and is of course committed for environmental protection. Her Royal Highness herself is a patron of the decade, and the foundation is a founding member of the Foundation Dialogue for the Decade, of course, of which we are very happy to have the Philanthropy Côte Solari a very active member of as well. And I wanted to highlight a few elements regarding our work. First, the Intercontinental Biosphere Reserve of the Mediterranean was the first intercontinental reserve declared by UNESCO, and the foundation played an important role in that regard. That reserve includes a marine corridor and draws a scenario of communication and collaboration between two different continents with two different conditions. It runs between southern Andalusia and northern Morocco, forming an open arc towards the Mediterranean and fractured by the Strait of Gibraltar. The core of our activities at the foundation are in terms of education for sustainable development and capacity building, in close partnership with the national partners such as the Ministry of National Education, Preschool and Sports, or international partners such as UNESCO, UNESCO IOC, IUCN, UNDP, the Foundation for Environmental Education, etc. And our targets in terms of those activities go from preschool children, primary school, high school, university, private sector, public sector decision makers, and other NGOs. And I wanted to provide a couple of examples on that. One, well, as I saw the gentleman from Mali was here, I wanted to indicate to him that 2 weeks ago, I welcomed at the center the president of the École Spéciale de Commerce, d'Administration, d'Entrepreneuriat of Mali for a capacity building course on carbon footprint. Another recent example was on November 6th, which for us in Morocco is a very important day celebrating the Green March. We launched an Africa Focus training program in partnership with the National Institute of Fisheries Research and the Early Career Ocean Professional Africa as an official UN Decade activity. More than 1,000 individuals across the continent registered for the course that is currently ongoing, and that includes modules on marine protected areas. We will then have, for some of those that successfully passed the course, in-person training programs on ocean research laboratories across Morocco, as well as include them in research vessel oceanic expeditions. Another opportunity is the African Youth Climate Hub. The call for application for the 3rd edition of the incubation program of AISH is open until November 25th. And in the build-up to the Nice Summit next year, we are keen to include particularly initiatives and projects that make the connection between ocean and climate. Now, regarding IUCN and IUCN-WCL, of course, fully aligned with the great presentation by Stuart moments ago, I wanted to highlight a couple of key messages that IUCN has identified in the context of COP29 that I think are of relevance to keep in mind going forward. For example, the importance of including concrete and quantified targets on nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches within the NDCs. The NDC 3.0 provide a very strategic and important opportunity that they should also reflect the outcome of the first global stocktake, which inter alia emphasize both the importance of enhanced efforts to halt and reverse deforestation and forest degradation by 2030, and of conserving biodiversity in line with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which of course includes the topic that we're discussing today. I don't want to read too much, but I strongly encourage you to consider and pay close attention to the key messages that we identified in that regard. The last key message I want you to highlight is the importance of the co-presidencies of the UNFCCC, CBD and UNCCD and the Convention Secretariat to jointly identify and promote concrete actions to strengthen cross-convention collaboration. In a context of a very busy year, as we were discussing with Stuart moments ago, the opportunity and the need for this kind of collaboration is very, very important. Regarding the commission itself, so the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law is one of 7 commissions. That one is led by Professor Voigt. We have 1,300 members, 8 specialist groups, including, for example, one on climate change law, one on biodiversity law. We have 4 task forces, including, for example, one on the task force on the plastics agreement. And the Commission will be organizing its 4th World Environmental Law Congress in May of next year. And the topic is integrated protection of air, ocean and land. Again, in the spirit of going against silos and driving coherent and cohesive solutions to address together the triple planetary environmental crisis and those 3 important areas. It will take place for the first time in Africa at the center that I have the honor of being the director of, following the amazing success of the 3rd one in Oslo last year. And we have already received more than 200 abstracts in the 3 IUCN languages, so in English, French and Spanish. And I will rest here in the interest of time. Thank you very much.
And it's really interesting, and certainly we're going to have time to discuss about the role of Morocco in the marine protected area, also in Africa. And last but not least, we're going to give the floor to the Professor Christophe Den Houwer, Professor of Université Côte d'Azur, Institut Chimie of Nice. His research interests cover environmental and human radiochemistry, looking at the fate and impact on the radioisotope of the hydrosphere, biotope and human. He's also the director of the Academy of Excellent Space, Environment, Risk and Resilience, and out of the 12 experts that joined the Green Deal European University Association Task Force to achieve the recognition and mobilization of universities as critical stakeholders for enhancing the Green Deal. From 2021, he's director of the University Research Initiative Space, Environment, Risk and Resilience that fosters transdisciplinary research projects and promote exchange between human and natural science. Mr. Den Houwer, we are very happy to have you here. We give you the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the introduction and the nice invitation. I think I will go to the entire end of the spectrum that we have discussed today, because I'm a chemist and I'm a researcher and as an environmental chemist, and what I've heard today is I think it's logical to say, and also probably obvious, that we need more scientific data, and so we need more scientific input in order to be able to manage large scales of reserves, and so this scientific input has evolved a lot, actually, as obviously all sciences, and as a chemist, I always teach students that we need to know the fundamental chemistry of metals, pollutants, organic pollutants, whatever, to be able to better describe their behavior in the environment, to better describe their transfer in the biotope, etc., and etc. And so that drives us to environmental chemistry, from environmental chemistry to fundamental chemistry as well, but also fundamental biology and ecology that converge to give us a better picture of what are the interconnections in those in nature. And so I really think we need more fundamental data. And lucky us, today we have more efficient instruments to look at those environmental data. What we have been dreaming of in the past decades is often possible to do. There has been a lot of progress in imaging, speciation. Speciation means a diversity of chemical and biochemical species. We have made progresses in analytical chemistry, so we are now able to count atoms, for instance. That was completely impossible to do a few decades ago. And so those new tools are really an advantage. And so I think it helps us to fill the gap between the very large scale of nature conservation that we've talked about today, but and research, and also small scale. An understanding at the biological scale, for instance, geochemical scale, geochemistry, etc., and etc. That's very difficult to do because you go from square kilometers areas to angstroms, so to be short, and that's a very difficult task. That's the task to link ecology with biology, chemistry, physics, geochemistry, etc., and etc. And of course, we are making a lot of progress with those new instruments today to be able to bridge this gap. I also would like to mention, as you've done in the introduction, that we need to call for different disciplines to do that. We need to call for all the natural sciences, of course, as I said, biology, biochemistry, chemistry, physics, geology, to be able to understand the entire picture, or to try to understand the entire picture. But we also need to call for human sciences, and you have mentioned the inclusion of native people in the conservation, but that's part of human sciences, economics as well, of course, law, politics, etc., and etc. And that's often very difficult to do, to build projects together with scientists or natural scientists and human sciences, economics, etc., because we don't speak the same language. But that's what we try to do at the university, and that's really I think an important task to do, to be able to understand really, to have another view of what's going on in conservation. And I would like, just as last words, to go back to what you mentioned on legacy, because legacy is, of course, very important, and it's also an area of research that is very fascinating, because we are dealing with past years' evolution of polluted areas. So we have in real time what happened for 50 years or maybe more than 100 years, and so we can learn from that the evolution of the speciation on site, in situ, and so legacy sites are for us as a researcher very often very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christophe. So what an interesting panel. First of all, I wish to open the floor to the public. I don't know if Some of you have some questions in general for all of them, or in particular, please.
I'm Dr. Vijayalakshmi. From India. I represent here in All India Women's Conference. That is a premier organization in women organization in India. Basically, I'm a researcher. That is why I came here. I sat here and listened the topics, because all the topics you presented here was so interesting, completely scientific in manner. But I would like to ask you one question only for all of the panels, or maybe a suggestions, because we spoke about many things and research findings here. That is wonderful. Legacies you spoke about, it is very good. All the researchers we are doing in the university or higher level, okay, the findings or how we can bring into the grassroots level. That means in the whole education ecosystem, how can we come into the school level? When you start your education in the school level, in the primary classes, there we needed to teach them science for climate action. Science for climate action should be a subject from first standard onwards to the university level, that it will be publicized easily. The students as well as the community can learn it properly. So for that, my question is, how will you, lobbying with your government, put into practice that event? Thank you. That is my question. Thank you.
That's a huge question. Please.
Thank you very much. It's very much at the core of what we do at the foundation through a lifelong learning approach. So, as I was briefly indicating earlier, hi Sandeep, as I briefly indicating earlier, we start from preschool all the way to universities, and that allows us to go from as they go older, but also learn from the older ones and bring it back to the younger ones. And through that, I can provide you with a few examples. One, together with UNSTSN, we looked at the curricula, the K-12 curricula. We reviewed them, everything that is used in K-12, all the material that is used, review them for integration of SDGs in line with Target 4.7, so through Mission 4.7. So we did that for K-12. Also, because we have the Eco Schools program, the Young Reporters for the Environment, and then another initiative I'll talk about later, we are able to have to grow with the children. As they grow, they always have a program with which they can engage with the foundation, and gradually, either to the curricula itself, but also activities outside of the curricula, but in some cases that are still mandatory. And then the final initiative we have for those that go to universities, we have the African Green Universities and Youth Education Network, that is a member of the Network of Networks, and actually a year ago in Bonn with Université Côte d'Azur, with Saran, we did a side event together. And in that sense, we bring together universities across Africa, 30 African universities in 14 African countries, to green the curricula and green the campuses. And quite often we try to do, I provide the last example, I don't want to be too long, but we did 2 weeks ago the National Conference on Adaptation. So we brought all kinds of ministries. We did that together with UNDP, and we agreed with UNDP. We pushed for it, and UNDP was easy to convince to include as the official reporter for each of the scientific session PhD students from African Green Universities, and then we also included high school students from across the Kingdom of Morocco to also engage in the topic, ask questions, and do their own report at the very end. So we try to very much, through a lifelong learning approach aligned with the Green Education Partnership of UNESCO or the Transforming Education Summit outcomes, provide exactly what you're discussing. That's why I was very happy when I heard your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund. Please.
Very quickly, because I think everybody wants to comment on this here. I think this is a super timely question. Often when we talk about conservation action, in fact, we always hear about the finance gap, but I also think equally important is the knowledge and capacity gap. There's no point generating finance if you don't actually have the knowledge and capacity to deliver that. I think just from an IUCN perspective, we are, as I said, I'm compiling the next IUCN program for the 4 years. We have written in, at the request of our members, nature-based education. That goes right through. It will link up with our members, such as Eamon has described. Also, for example, the Schools Club of Kenya, which has got massive reach, really trying to work that that through. And I think as well, in Cali, we had an action plan approved on nature and education as well. So I do think there's an actual real momentum building around this now, and thank you for your question.
Yeah, I can answer for a master program actually that we have at the university. I'm sure in other universities as well, but we have a master on environmental risk management that combines different disciplines, and they have, of course, all the risk management and environmental courses that you can imagine, but also they have some maths, chemistry, basic ones, and that's done for students that are not scientists at the basis. And I think that's very important to mix those different disciplines in order to have a broader view for those students of what they are going to try to understand in their future.
Thanks very much for the question. I'm not sure to what extent I could really add, just to say that within the CBD we had, from 2010, there was the intention to try and make people aware of the term biodiversity and understanding on a sort of a broad level what that was. Now we're getting to a point where we need people to understand that it's not just a nice to have, but fundamentally important for us, both in terms of just our day-to-day lives, but also, of course, in the context of climate change. And Stuart's absolutely right. There has been advancements now in terms of trying to get that into educational systems. We just need governments to take some of these excellent examples forward and put them into curricula at all levels. So it's not just pure ecology or whatever it is, to understand what nature means or what climate change is, but also how are they all interlinked and how we can find positive solutions and not just looking at them as existential crises. Thanks.
I don't know whether you heard at the start my CV introduced by Patricia, but if you did, you'll know this is absolutely at the heart of what I do and have done for a long time. And it's great to hear about IUCN talking about nature-based education, which is, of course, not new. We all learn in, with, through, about, and for the natural world throughout the whole of history. And yet we've forgotten that that's what we actually learned and how we learned and where we learned. What can I say in terms of a practical input? Well, yesterday, 24 hours ago, I gave a whole talk on this particular issue with regard to the work that we've been doing in Scotland and beyond. And at the moment, we're running an online MOOC in sustainable education, which has been built through some years of practice, actually. But to go right back to the very core issue, to me, there's one thing that we need to keep in mind, that most preschool and primary educators don't have any scientific training to any great degree. So there is actually a real gap there across provision in most countries at that level. If the children don't get, they aren't in the presence of someone who loves science in the way in which they love literature or whatever else they might love when they're learning in those very early stages, they're not going to pick up on that to the same degree, which is why in some ways we see a dearth of people who are academics in the sciences who are women, for example, because most primary and preschool teachers are women. Now, in Scotland, just to give you a little bit of policy, we have embedded nature-based learning and related issues in our curriculum for young people throughout the whole of their school years in a topic called Learning for Sustainability, which is an entitlement of all young people and a requirement of all teachers. And there's much more I could show you and tell you about that policy context, but it's embedded in the way in which we do things. So I thank you for your question. To me, it's at the heart of what we do. Thank you.
Francisca, do you want to edit something? Then Ayman? Francisca, please.
¿Se escucha?
Sí.
Sí. Gracias a todos. Creo que ha sido un tremendo panel donde hemos podido hablar de tantas cosas que son importantes, sobre todo el tema de la educación. Cuando nosotros partimos con Fundación Mary, hace unos 8 o 9 años atrás, yo creo, para nosotros era fundamental entender de que la ciencia era muy importante en ese momento.
So for us at that time, science was obviously very important.
Pero nuestro rol era, entendíamos de que la ciencia estaba como metida como en una cápsula.
But we
Y
understood at
también
that time
veíamos
that science was
que
in a
habían
kind
ciertas
of capsule
competencias,
and
tal vez por el tema de los
there were a little bit
papers, un
of
poco
competitions
guardando
between
tal vez en ese
scientists.
momento, guardando información por los papers.
Well,
Entonces para nosotros fue un
scientists
tremendo
in the group
desafío
used to be very
levantarnos y decir, bueno,
competitive.
necesitamos sacar la
We really
información
made a huge
ahora.
work in order
No
to
podemos
explain them
esperar
the
que un
importance to
paper
show the
vaya a
information
salir en 2
outside.
años más porque estamos cuidando algo.
We
¿Qué estamos
understand that
cuidando? Y ese fue como el primer
a
diagnóstico que
different world,
tuvimos
but
cuando
we need to
nosotros
make
quisimos meternos en
dialogue
el
with
tema de
the
la
rest of the
ciencia.
world.
Entonces fue bien irruptivo
That
el
was
que
a kind of
privados se
different and
metieran en el mundo de la
disruptive
ciencia.
to have
Obviamente
those
que
private
no fue
sector
para nada fácil.
working with
Pero lo
scientists
que
at
nosotros
first.
hacíamos justamente era hacer ciencia de buena calidad,
But what to try to do is
buscando
do
objetos de
science,
conservación en cada uno de los
working
territorios.
around
Por ejemplo, en
the
el norte del
species under
flamenco, nosotros
threat,
encontrar el Congo
with the flamingo,
y
for example, in the
la
north of
Patagonia,
Chile,
la
or the
ballena
whales
azul.
in the south of Chile, in
Entonces
the north of
nosotros con
Patagonia.
esa ciencia que
And with
seguimos haciendo
that
hasta hoy en día,
data,
porque
with
los
the
programas
evidence, this
continúan,
science,
convertimos esto en material
we
educativo.
traduce that
Y este
evidence, that
material
scientific
educativo
evidence,
es el que
in
se
educational
implementa en
material
programas educativos en todas las
in
zonas.
order to develop
Lo
educational
maravilloso
program
es que
in
cuando
those
hablamos de la
areas.
ballena azul,
So when we
no
talk about
solamente
blue
estamos hablando
whales,
de la ballena azul, sino estamos
we are not
hablando de un
only talking
ecosistema
about the blue whales
completo
by itself,
que
but
viene desde
we
la
are talking
importancia
about a
desde el
whole
glacial,
ecosystem
desde la
that affects
importancia
the
de
glaciers,
los árboles o los cipreses de la
that also
huayteca en este
affect
caso,
in
la
very
ramita de
specific
Darwin es importante.
ecosystem lands
Todo
in,
es importante
in the bay where
cuando
the whales
utilizamos
are.
un
I mean, it
animal
affects
en
all the
peligro de
ecosystem, all
extinción.
the latitude
Por lo
also.
tanto, toma el ecosistema completo.
So it
Estoy
takes
como
the ecosystem as a
tratando
whole.
de explicar un
I'm
poco
trying to explain
lo que a nosotros nos ha resultado y ha
what
sido
have worked
tremendo.
for us.
Tomar
has
un
been
animal
a
en
huge
peligro de extinción,
success
bajar
to
la
take
información
an
en
important
material
animal, species
educativo
under
de
threat,
muy buen nivel
try to
y
traduce the
poner
scientific
personas a hacer
evidence in
clases en
educational
todos los
programs
territorios.
and
Y no
work
solamente en,
work
en
in
el
all the
mismo
territory
territorio,
with teachers
sino que
and
también
students.
nos vamos
And not
trasladando
and not
con
only,
la información de las
in the
ballenas
specific
al
territory,
norte,
but in the
con la
rest of the
información de los
countries.
cóndores al sur,
For
porque
example, we
también
take the
hacemos
information
debates
from the
con
condors in north of
Entonces,
Chile to the
son
south.
clases muy dinámicas y
And
muy
we
entretenidas.
create very
Esa ha sido la
funny
forma en
and
que nosotros
dynamic
hemos encontrado
class
para
and
poder
teaching
educar
group. That's a way
con un
that we
foco
have
muy preciso
found
a los
and
niños,
create
niñas y jóvenes.
to help
Pero también hay
kids
algo
to
más.
understand what is
Cuando
happening.
vino el COVID,
But
también nos dimos
also,
cuenta
when the COVID
de que
arrives, we
estábamos educando a los
understood
niños.
that
que
we
los
were
ni- los niños y
educated
las
as
niñas
far only
jóvenes,
students or young
que ellos
people.
igual venían con otro tipo de
But young
espíritu.
people, they already
Entonces,
have
nos dimos
another
cuenta que al
setup,
final
let's say.
lo que teníamos que cambiar
And we
éramos
understood that
nosotros, antes que
we
ellos.
need to work with
Nosotros
teacher,
enseñándole
with
a
people
los
like
niños
us,
de
with
la
adults.
naturaleza.
It wasn't
Cuando en
enough to
realidad
work
ellos
with
ya vienen con la
students. We need
naturaleza.
to work with
Por lo
adults.
tanto, ahí nuestros programas se fueron rápidamente a trabajar con docentes.
This is where we decide when we
Anualmente
decide to
sacamos
work with
750
teachers.
profesores
And
anualmente
each year we
formados
work
que se
with
forman durante 3 meses
750
en una cosa
teachers
integral que donde
with a
metemos la
very
conservación,
integrated
el
program
desarrollo
where we
humano y
teach
múltiples
about
cosas
conservation,
que apoyan
multidimensional
también a los
conservation,
docentes a volver a
in order
tomar el
to help
espíritu
them
de lo
to be in
importancia
contact
que es ser
with
un maestro.
nature and
Entonces, también
to
ahí,
teach to other students.
Creo que hay otro punto que es que no es que hayamos dejado de lado a
It
los
doesn't
niños,
mean that
y a las
we are
niñas,
not
y a los
working with
jóvenes,
students
sino
or
que
young people
entendimos
anymore.
que era más efectivo
It's just
trabajar
a matter of
con los docentes
decision and decide to work
para
with
poder
teacher
llegar
in order to arrive
más rápido a los
indirectly
niños y que ellos
and more quickly
implementaran
maybe
en sus salas de
to
clase
a
todo este
major
tipo
quantity
de
of young people and students.
cosas como la conservación,
And this is a way we
ciertas
found to work
técnicas
around
para llevar las
conservation and
clases,
specific
autocuidado, etcétera,
technique
etcétera.
of well-being.
Muchas
Thank
gracias.
you very much. Ayman, I want to give the floor to you.
Very briefly, 3 quick points. One, I fully align with the approach that was highlighted just now by the distinguished executive president. Second, that I'm very happy to be a member of the task force that that Stuart just referred to. And third, which was the main reason why I wanted to get the microphone again, was to indicate to you, as you're from India and given where you focus, there's a side event, and I'm reassuring you, I'm not a speaker there, so you won't have to sit through me speaking again. But there is a side event taking place later today at 6:30 p.m., organized by the Center for Environmental Education that is based in India, together with the FI and the Office for Climate Education. It's called Meeting the Greening Education Partnership Targets with Quality Critical Enablers, and it's at 6:30 p.m. inside event room 6, if you're interested.
Well, thank you very much, all of you. It has been a very, very interesting panel. As an economist, I cannot forget the need of governance and certification to go further and to move toward maybe a market that allow us to make it sustainable. But thank you, all of you. You can hear and listen again this panel through of course, if you have a question.
Thank you so much for giving me a chance. I am Dr. Upasana Singh. I am from All India Women Conference, India. I am a treasurer there. It was a wonderful conversation, which I was enjoying a lot. My question is, someone mentioned about the biodiversity and using non-operational lands of private sectors for controlling biodiversity. I think it is a wonderful idea because the non-operational lands are so much in the quantity. But I would like to know, how are you going to do it, and will you introduce it in the world forum globally to give importance to this idea, so that people who are having unused lands, they can be given for this noble cause for the this climate change and all these things. So thank you so much. I would like to know about that.
Thank you very much for your question. Who want to answer? You?
Thanks very much. I think just for everybody to know, in case that when licenses are awarded by governments, usually to a private sector entity, let's say for a mining operation, they just don't award the license for where they will make the hole in the ground. There is an extensive area around that. A lot of that will not be. It's not intended to be used. And that's what we mean by non-operational land. And I think this has been sitting there, and the area is massive. It really is. It's much bigger than the areas that are actually being exploited. So it is sitting there. It has been a conversation that we've been ongoing for a while. We've engaged with several companies around that. I think actually the next thing is to take this up and formalize it a little bit more. We were looking for a hook, and this is where I think OECMs, so OECMs now could be a hook where we can say, and it's not just to tick the box, it's to say make sure that there are robust conservation measures being put in place. But it's rather than just that land sitting there as such. It's saying, right, this can now be proactively moved. Companies, they may want to take it for as part of, as we move into this issue of nature positive, which we haven't mentioned, and corporate responsibility to disclose their biodiversity impacts, that these might be ways of actually being able to help companies to demonstrate actions they are taking, additional conservation actions. So I think we're just at the start of that. It's been a conversation, as I said, it's been a conversation we've been having for about 10 years, but there was not that hook. But I do think now with issues around corporate disclosure, nature positive approaches, and the issue of OECMs being recognized now as a mechanism to move towards Target 3, I think we'll build momentum. So I think the question is, watch this space. we will have, I mean, obviously the World Conservation Congress is in Abu Dhabi next year. I think this issue will come up, and then 2027 there will be the next World Parks Congress, and I imagine again that will be one of the issues that feature strongly there. Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, we need to close. That's very interesting panel. Thank you, all of you. And I propose to take a picture, a global picture of all of you. And please, if you can stay then to interview some of you or all of you, it would be great. Thank you very much.